Funky fantasy. Stratus Arrow special guest edition. It's the War of Nerds. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the War of Nerds podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Nathan Helm, the Funky Fantasy Man.
And I'm Ryan Morgan, also known as Stratos Eros.
And tonight, we have a special guest, the author of the Wild Eye Southern Boys series, Richard Ryan Rose. Welcome, and thank you for coming on the show, man.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. Well, why don't you take the floor away and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you write and everything.
All right. Well, okay. I'll give you the Reader's Digest version of my long life. But now so I just recently retired from the United States Air Force. Spent 34 years in the military between the Army and the Air Force. And I'm fed up with the military. I'm done with the military. I'm retired. So thank God for that. But had a great career. I was security forces, artillery, civil affairs, and special operations, and also served as a drill instructor, military training instructor for you Air Force folks, a drill sergeant for you non-Air Force folks, and ended up retiring a chief master sergeant in charge of the guard liaison training. Guard training liaisons, which I won't bore you and explain what that is all about. So I also served 10 years as a police officer prior to going full time in the Air Force, and I'm the author of Wild Eye Southern Boys, which is a 3-book series right now. I'm working on book 4. It is a buddy story. It is horror, sci-fi, comedy, fantasy. It's kind of a genre bender. If you like all things cryptid, if you're into Bigfoot, Jersey Devil, Dogman, things of that nature, all these cryptid creatures that supposedly don't exist, then you'll find them in my book because they certainly exist in my world. So, Wild Eyed Southern Boys is the name of my book series, and I will be happy to talk more about that subject. But if you want to read a series about warrior Sasquatches fighting against evil in the Great Smoky Mountains in my hometown of East Tennessee, I grew up in Knoxville, but the story takes place in Townsend, Tennessee. We'll get more into that. But if you like Bigfoot and if you like zombies and Wendigos and all kinds of strange creatures that may or may not exist, then you'll probably like my series.
And do you have one of your books or all 3 of them near you that you can hold up onto the screen and show the covers?
You know what? Dadgummit. I really should have done that.
That's all right. We can add those in. We can pop them up on the screen later. So it's just if you had it handy.
I've actually got posters down in my bedroom. Why they're in my bedroom, I don't know. I don't really have a good explanation for that, and I'll just leave it at that. But I mean, but I have them in my I was going to hang them up in my office. So yeah, sorry about that. But if you look
that's all right.
Amazon,
yep,
look it up on Amazon, you'll see the fine cover art from Wendy Sabrecore.
Awesome.
When we do the video editing, we'll have them all pop up, all 3 of them, put them across the screen so people, and plus your social media links and everything will be at the bottom of the video for our viewers and everything, so that they can find you and all that good stuff. So with that being said, also you're on the right show because most of us are genre benders, a very kit bash style for most of us in the ways that we write. So you're in the right spot, man. So my first question for you, since you've answered a few of those right there, I want to know, what is your process for creating your world and your characters and your universe? How do you go about coming up with that stuff and kind of your creative process?
Okay, well, that is a great question. So I guess I'll start from the beginning. So I got the idea for Wild Eyed Southern Boys when I was at the ripe old age of maybe 8. If you ever heard of the Weekly World News, that old tabloid that you used to see at the grocery store and when you're in line for your mom or dad to pay for the groceries?
Yep.
And it was all BS. It was just, fake stories, like Bat Boy or stuff about Bigfoot, you know.
Yeah.
It was all fake stories, you know. So and so I see the story, and it's a picture of a Sasquatch holding up these two dogs in each arm, and this little boy backed up against a tree, you know, scared to death, and it says superhero Sasquatch saves boy from wild dogs. So I know you've listened to my book. So if you remember the scene where Rue gets rescued by Buford, saves Rue from those from those wild dogs, that's the opening scene of my book, and that I got that idea back when I was 8 years old. I'm 52 now, so you know, do the math because I can't. I'm too old. But
48,
44.
50, 44. Yeah, there you go. I can't do math either.
That's all right.
Thanks. I feel much
4
older.
decades.
But
still look like a 35. You're in your prime, man.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it. Yeah, but I mean, so when I saw that, I got to thinking, you know, because I was intrigued by Bigfoot since I was like maybe 4. My dad used to take me Bigfoot hunting all the time. So if you see my first book, my book is dedicated to my dad, who Ricky Rue is the main character, and that's my dad's nickname. That's the nickname he had growing up. I don't know where he got it, but so that's where I decided to name my main character. He used to take me Bigfoot hunting all the time. You know, he would have his 22 rifle, and I'd have my my little pump action BB gun that shot plastic BBs. I figured that was plenty enough firepower for a savage Sasquatch, you know. And we never found him. He always managed to give us a slip, even though we lived out in the middle of the woods. But that's I got the idea, like, what if Bigfoot is not a scary monster? What if he's actually a good guy? What if he's out there actually protecting the forest? What if he is the protector of the forest they inhabit? And what if they're actually out there battling evil? What if there are bad guy monsters out there that Bigfoot's protecting us from? And so that's kind of where I got the idea at a very young age, and it just evolved through the next, 44 years? Is that what you said?
Yep.
And 44, well, okay, let's rewind, maybe 41 years, because I've written 3 books since then. But yeah, that's where that idea just kind of evolved from age 8 to age 47 when I first started writing my first book. But
Yeah,
that's where the idea came in. All the characters in my books are based on people I know. So whether they're good guys, bad guys, sometimes people I know and love are villains in my books. So
Nice.
nobody's safe from being either a villain, a villain, or a good guy. Most of the people I like are good guys in my books, but my own son is a villain in the book. Cody, the guy that beats up Rue, yeah, that's my son, and yeah, that never happened in real life. I never will, but because Rue's based on me. But I told my son, he said, that's the only time you'll ever beat up your dad is in my book. Yeah.
You could always have a villain called Villian.
I could, but I don't know anybody named Villian. I like to make characters based
That's
on
fair.
people I know.
Yeah,
It's fun. It's fun for the people I know, especially. But
that's awesome.
That's a really cool concept, and it's cool that it came from your childhood and it kind of became that passion project that I assume you held on to the whole time and picked up bits and pieces. But with your history of both the military and the police, did a lot of that influence some of the things that you wrote in any way?
oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, because the military and law enforcement, it's not just jobs that I did. It's part of who I am. It's part of made me who I am today. Good, for good or for better or for worse. And so yeah, it played a lot of influence. Ricky Rue, the character, he's an Air Force security forces veteran, just like me, and he is also trying to get in. He wants to be a law enforcement. He wants to, when he gets out of the Air Force, he wants to be a cop. He wants to be a law enforcement officer, just like I was, and so there's a lot of parallels there. And there's some things in the book that actually happened in real life, minus the zombies and Sasquatches. But
I mean, that could be top secret. We don't know. So
True. Yeah. I'll swear myself to secrecy if I actually know something. So,
And I do have to know this. So, do you ever run into writer's block? And if you do, how do you handle it?
okay, that's another great question. I sometimes I run into writer's block because it's mainly my own doing. I'm my own worst enemy when it comes to that, because sometimes I develop these plots. If you read my books, the plots are not so complex you can't understand them, because I hate that.
Mhm.
Even Game of Thrones gets on my nerves sometimes. All the intrigue and all the conspiracies and stuff. I hate watching that crap. It's like, that's so confusing. I don't like this.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
but my stories are fairly complex, and we branch up. We have backstories, we have side stories. But all these backstories, side stories, and everything, they all link together, and they all make sense when they do come together.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a when it comes to writer's block, there are a few things like okay, I know when I start a book, I know how I want it to begin, I know how I want it to end, and I know a few things in the middle, but I don't know how I'm going to make it all work. I know what needs to happen. I know this needs to happen, but how am I going to make it happen to where it makes sense and where it doesn't leave any plot holes? That's the biggest challenge. I can't say I've ever ran into complete writer's block, but I have had issues with making all the things that need to happen and making it to where it all makes sense, and that takes a bit of work. Um, I do a lot of historical research when I'm doing like my backstories with the Knights Templar and stuff like that. Um, when it comes to writer's block, here's the thing: because when I first started writing, I wrote my prologue maybe 5 or 6 times, just the prologue. It took me like
Yeah.
almost my first month writing my prologue, and I realized I'm trying to write this one little section of my book to where it's perfect, and it really wasn't working out that well for me. So I reached out to a friend of mine, Mark Tufo, who's a widely known author of the zombie Fallout, Icon Fallout series. He's got a bunch of stuff out there. He's a much bigger name than I am, and which ain't saying much, but but he is. He told me, he said, "Man, just write the book. Just write the damn book." Oh, sorry. Just write the daggum book.
All right.
Sorry. um, and he said, "Yeah, you can go back, you'll edit, you'll perfect it later, but put the story on paper. It's not going to be perfect. Your first draft's not going to be perfect. Your first draft probably not going to be good at all.
Mhm.
But write it, and then go back and finish."
100%.
Absolutely.
And then that worked out so much better for me. I mean, I just wrote my first draft, and it wasn't perfect. It wasn't anything that I would just turn around and publish right then and there, but it was solid. And I'm like, okay, I've got me a solid, framework here. Now I can go in and, okay, let's do the editing. Let's run it through Grammarly. Of course, I'm going to hire an editor too, but you know, do all the finessing after you get the story done. Get the story on paper first. That's my best advice that was given to me, that I'm paying for it now.
I mean,
Well said, man.
you think about it, when people ask for writing advice, one thing will work for one person and something might not work for another person. So like, I'm very similar to you. I can't stop after writing one chapter and try to just perfect that chapter. I have to go through and finish the draft. Otherwise, my creative process it becomes a draining thing instead of an enjoyable thing. And
Right.
when you're done, you go back through and easier to tie those strings together. And because I'm very much like a pantser more than I am a plotter. So,
Mhm.
which is kind of sounds what you are too, is much
Yeah.
more a pantser.
Yeah. Yeah. I have gone back after I've written my first draft and storyboarded
Yeah.
and diagrammed everything, and that has its benefit too, because it really helped me alleviate any plot holes, because it really breaks everything down like a shotgun. And when you go back through your story, like, okay, I need to fix this, I need to fix that, because I make notes as I go along, and I also take the notes from my beta readers as well. And so, I'll take that, I'll storyboard it, and I'll put it in a nice little diagram, which, I'm doing a lot more work than a lot of other authors do, but actually a friend of mine showed me how to do it, and it is so beneficial.
Mhm.
It's time consuming, but it's so beneficial when it comes to, like, hey, I need to make sure that I clear this up, because, several chapters later, it's not going to make sense if I don't.
Yeah.
If that makes sense, I mean, so I do a lot of I'll do that after the fact, but some guys, they'll diagram. Some authors are not guys, I'm sorry, but some authors, they'll diagram. They'll do an outline of their books. They'll do all that beforehand, and that's fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that either. I like to write my first draft and then go back to do the storyboarding and editing,
Nice.
and everything. But I'll run it through Grammarly as I'm writing,
Yeah.
but yeah,
100%.
yeah.
You got the next one, Ryan. Sorry if I
Yeah,
cut you off earlier.
No, you're good. I was just gonna kind of touch on that a little bit. I like the idea of going back and like making sure all your connections link up and everything. When I first started writing, like I'm trying to write a big series, and I had to timeline things just for ages of characters over a long period of time. Like, okay, it's been 6 years. Well, what age were they when it started, and what age are they now? And now there's this other character. Where were they on that timeline? So I always fall back to that similar thing of making sure all that stuff aligns, because you're always going to have those readers that are looking for those holes to poke in. But
oh yeah.
But going on from that, I had a question of like, was there a book from either your childhood or throughout your entire life that's really like shaped your writing style, or just that you've been your favorite that you've always gone back to?
Yeah. Okay. So I actually got really into books when it's like Father's Day 100 years ago. my wife and kids got me a copy of World War Z.
Oh,
And I was in recruiting in the military at the time, and I was doing a lot of traveling because I was doing marketing, and so I was on a plane a lot. So I'm like, okay, I think I've read maybe 2 books up to that point. I was in my 40s when I got World War Z, and I've read a couple of Edgar Rice Burroughs books. That's pretty much it. I've read Interview with the Vampire. That was the only one I ever read.
Nice.
And but I started listening to audiobooks when I was traveling, because when I drive home from DC, it's an 8-hour trip to Knoxville. So I mean, I would be like, I was like, I'm gonna start listening to an audiobook. I love zombies, so I'm like, I'm gonna start listening to zombie books.
Mhm.
And so I started listening to Mark Tufo, and he had a lot of influence on how I write. Because my books are written in like journal entries from my 2 main characters, and so I got that. I kind of got that idea from Mark Tufo and Chris Philbrook. Chris Philbrook had a great series. He still has a great series called Adrian's Undead Diary.
Mhm.
And that's another big series I got into, and I got to know Chris Philbrook and become friends with him. Great guy. So their writing influenced a lot of my writing in a lot of ways, and kind of a cool story, because I was on a podcast, and we interviewed Chris Philbrook, and I was a huge fan of Chris Philbrook. I still am a huge fan of Chris Philbrook, even more so now.
Mhm.
And we interviewed him, and I'm like, telling him, we're talking to him about Adrian's Undead Diary, and he's got a lot more series out there than just that. He's a big name writer. And well, I wasn't going to say anything. I just released my first book, and Jack Childress, my the main host of the show, was like, "Hey man, you need to check out Wild Eye Southern Boys from this guy." He said, "You love it," and I didn't think he would. I didn't think he would buy it, and he did.
Mhm.
and he listened to my first book, and really enjoyed it, really loved it, and left just left a glowing review on Goodreads, Amazon, and Audible, and it just it really, I mean, my book sales went way up after he did it. So I mean, very, very much appreciated, and it was kind of cool because one of your favorite authors is now a fan of your book. So I mean, that's I'll never forget that. That's just really a cool experience when one of your favorite authors actually enjoys a book that you've written. So that's pretty cool.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
It is. And now we're gonna go polar opposite from one of the most awesome experiences you've had to
Okay.
what's your most embarrassing moment in your writing career that you've
Oh
ever
my
had
gosh.
happen?
Okay. That is easy. That's an
Oh.
easy question to answer. Okay. So when I first released my book, this is embarrassing. I wish you hadn't asked this question, but I'm going to answer it. So when I first released my very first book, I went through, I didn't know what I was doing at the time, of course. And like when you write it in Word and you put it in their template with Amazon and everything, and then when it goes to PDF, sometimes things get jacked up.
Mhm.
The formats, the margins, everything gets jacked up. So if you want to know how to do it correctly the first time, I can walk you through it because I learned how. But one thing that it was I noticed all this, like chapters starting at the bottom of the page instead of the top of the page, and I'm kind of OCD, so that just drives me nuts.
Mhm.
I'm like, oh no, I just released my first book, and this chapter's starting down here, not up here. No, but when I had, but the most embarrassing part about it is like I went back and I corrected all those format errors, and then I re-released my book, and Amazon kept kicking it back, saying that you have a grammar error on the first few pages, but it didn't really point out exactly what it was. I'm like, what's going on here? So I go, on the cover, everything's fine. You open it up, a couple pages in, and it has like the title, Wild Eyed Southern Boys by Richard R. Rose. Except after my second release, I realized that the title said Wild Eyed Southern Boys. I left out the U in Southern. I misspelled the title of my book. So yeah, that was pretty embarrassing. So I had to fix that. But so there might be some of you that own I guess a special copy of my misspelled version. So hold on to it. It might be worth some money someday.
Yeah, that's a collector's item now.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I think it's fun to share embarrassing moments. Like if we can't
Mhm.
laugh about the things that, happen to us in our careers, then what are we doing anyways? Like
Right?
Yeah. I like to say
I
my,
had
my writing career is a long road of just, perfectly paved, a perfectly paved road with no mistakes, but I'd be lying.
yeah.
Well, it took you 44 years, but it seems like you've really struck a stride now and you're churning out books. Where do you see yourself in the next 5-10 years with keeping going, or you have plans with it?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'll share a little something personal with you because when I started writing my book, I was going through a lot of personal issues. I just lost my father. I'm a combat vet, ex-police officer. I've had some bad experience. I have PTSD.
Mhm.
Um, Not ashamed to say that because I got it doing what a lot of people wouldn't dare do. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I'm okay with that, but not okay with having PTSD. It sucks. If you ever get a chance to get it, don't do it. Pardon my language again. I'm sorry.
No, you're
Oh,
fine.
it's all right.
Um, but it was therapy. It was therapeutic for me,
Mhm.
and I based it on people that I know and love because I've lost some people that I knew and love, and lost my dad, lost one of my really good friends, who Buford is partially based on. Buford is the main Sasquatch character. Ricky Rue, aka Rue, is the human main character. The human main character is based on me. usually a younger, sexier version of me, and and Buford is based on three of my best friends. One of them I served with in the military, one of them I served with in law enforcement, who is no longer with us, Keith Fletcher, God rest his soul, and my best friend from childhood, Scott Atkins, who is he's still my best friend after 40 plus years, and that's who Buford's mainly based on, and he is and you know, my best friend's a huge fan of my books for obvious reasons. but yeah, that's who he is based on. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of losing track a little bit. What was your question?
Where you see your series or your
Okay.
journey as a writer going in the next 5 to 10 years, but
You know, my 5 to 10 years. So this is my okay. The point I'm trying to make is this has been kind of therapeutic for me, and you know, I've kind of not been able to write because I started a new job after retiring from the military, and I'm back into writing finally. And book 4 is coming this year, I promise. But I don't see me not writing in the next 5 to 10 years. I do see a new series coming out.
oh,
Yeah, because once I finish this series, well, I mean, okay. Let me retract that a little bit. I'm going to write Wild Eye Boyz as long as I'm still enjoying writing it, and as long as my readers still enjoy reading it.
Sure.
Yeah, it's a very very heartfelt story to me. It's a heartwarming story versus as well as, you know, it's scary, it's funny, it's fun, it's exciting, but it's also it's got some heartfelt experiences in the book.
sure.
Yeah, you'll laugh and you'll probably cry when you read my books. If you don't cry on some of them, you're just not human. Because I for the longest time I didn't think I even had tear ducts, but I cried a river of tears writing these books. But yeah. But
I
as
think
far as that, I'm going to start a new series pretty soon after this 4th book. I'm not going to
nice.
end Wild Eyed Southern Boys, but I'm going to start a new series with Buford and Rue in space.
Oh,
It's going to be a
Okay.
sci-fi series, and you might see Buford and Rue in space prior to that series starting out in the next book. I'm not saying, I'm just saying.
That's awesome. And I think as writers, if we don't feel the emotion when we're writing, then we have no business doing it. Like, you should be feeling some sort of emotion while you're in the process. I mean, I've
Yeah.
cried, I've laughed, I've all those things while I've been writing, because you're connected to your own characters, just like you hope others will be. So that's awesome. Like, feeling all those emotions while you put the words on paper. And space is always fun. So
Yeah.
that'll be exciting to see where that goes.
Yeah, and before we like move on to another question real quick, just to touch on a little bit what you said with it being therapeutic, I think that goes for a lot of us writers, and I can't even begin to empathize with what you or Nathan have gone through and the sacrifices you guys have made just to serve alone, whether any of that goes further and beyond that. But any writer who puts their emotions and their stuff into their work to be therapeutic for themselves, it's also therapeutic for the readers. And I'm sure a lot of your readers read it, understand some of what you've gone through, and it's therapeutic for them as well, just to see your story, go through your story, and kind of get an escape for themselves. So I hope my work can someday have an impact on even one person's life in that kind of a way. And I think without even, I haven't read your work or listened to it yet, but I definitely think just the way you speak of that you've touched somebody with your work already, I'm sure of. But
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, I know I have, and
that's good.
I'm very very blessed to
Mhm.
have that experience, because I'm not tooting my own. I'm not uh tooting my own horn by saying that. It's just my readers have, you know, reached out to me with
Mhm.
some pretty emotional testimonies, and it really motivates me to keep writing.
That's awesome.
It's awesome. And I know part of this question because you and we met at a convention last year in July, but what conventions have you been to, and are you going to any this year? And do you have like a specific favorite one that you go to that you've enjoyed the most, or just your general experience with conventions?
Dadgum, man, you are a natural at this, man. You're asking some great questions here, and I appreciate it.
Of course.
Yeah. Yeah, I will. I definitely. I have. I've been to many of Bigfoot festivals and conferences. I do set up a booth. My lovely, talented wife makes big, Sasquatch related merchandise. She's an artist. So yeah, she's not a writer, but
She's
she's
good
an
at it.
artist in a different right, and she's way more talented than I am.
She's
But
really good at that stuff.
yeah, but she makes all these Bigfoot, all this different Bigfoot merchandise, and I sell my books and of course, signed copies. It triples the value when I sign it, of course. But but my we do a lot of Bigfoot conferences. That's where we've done some author conventions, just like Texas Author Con and stuff, and we do best at our Bigfoot festivals for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
Subject matter. As a matter of fact, I will be at the Smoky Mountain Bigfoot Festival in Townsend, Tennessee, which is the setting of my books. Everything takes place in Townsend, Tennessee. Well, not everything takes place in Townsend, but that's where the main stories take place. And which is right at the entrance of the Great Smoky Mountains. If you've never been to Townsend, Tennessee, my gosh, you need to go there. It is my favorite place in the world. Beautiful, beautiful place to go. Nice small town, right there before you get into the Smoky Mountains, and just one of the most beautiful places in the world. And people come from all over the world to see it. And that's my home. That's where I grew up. So I'm very passionate about the Smoky Mountains, and that's why I have Sasquatch protecting the Smoky Mountains. But the
You said there was one of those coming up soon that you're going to?
yeah, the Smoky Mountain Bigfoot Festival in Townsend. I will have a booth set up there, and we'll be selling our merchandise and signing our books. So please come by and pay us a visit. But it is a great festival, and there'll be some big name speakers there. I'll also be at the Smoky Mountain Bigfoot Conference in Gatlinburg later in the year. I am looking at going to Hocking Hills in Ohio, as well as Crypticon, looking into those events.
Nice.
Yeah, I tried to get into the Western North Carolina Bigfoot Festival that I did so well at last year, but I waited too late. So unfortunately, I won't be there this year.
But you'll be at TBR.
Yeah, I will also be at the Tennessee Book Readers Convention in September here in Knoxville, Tennessee. I will be there at that convention as well. So I'm really looking forward to that and hanging out with some of my fellow authors like yours truly here.
And Alfred Muller, our other host, will also be there as well. So you'll get to meet him as well. We're both excited for that one.
Okay, Ryan, you're not going to be there?
I'm tied down right now, so I haven't hit the convention scene yet, but it's on my list, and I'm waiting to go with Nathan and Alfred to one of these conventions so the three of us can actually meet in person, because we have yet to do that, but it's on our list.
Really?
Yeah. So we all met by happenstance. So, and our complete fluke, and we just hit it off. So we said, why not start a podcast?
Go for it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Did you have one next, Ryan, brother?
Yeah.
You want me to hit it?
No, I got one. So I love your concepts. I love the cryptids that you go into. I do enjoy that stuff. I haven't delved deep into it, but every time I see them pop up on my feeds, I'm hooked, usually just by the different ones that exist out there. And then the folklore of Yetis and Bigfoot and Sasquatch and the Chupacabra, all the little ones that you hear about more commonly. But if you could turn your book with that kind of stuff into a movie or a TV show, what would it kind of be like? Or is there's something relative to it that you would make it similar to?
My gosh, you guys are just full of awesome questions this evening. So yeah, that is my evil plan.
Ooh.
Is to get my books on a screen somewhere, whether it be the big screen, small screen. I would just love to see the story played out.
Mhm.
I would just love to see it, and that is something I am I'm looking into. Uh, I'm going to reach out. I'm reaching out to agents and everything to try to maybe make that happen. I mean, I'm a long ways from
Sure.
it. I actually met like Giorgio from Ancient Aliens.
Mhm.
I can't remember his last name. It's a long last name. The guy with the freaky hair,
Yeah.
Yeah, I met him at the Smoky Mountain Bigfoot Festival last year, and we got talking. He's like, "Man, you should make a movie out of this book." Because I was telling him about my book. Like, I'd love to. Like, hey, you could. I was like, seriously, man. Yeah, and he's giving me all kinds of advice. And his agent was there with him, and he's like, "Yeah, man, you need to do this, this, and this." And I'm like, "Okay." So I've been kind of looking into that. I'm finally to the point now where I can have some spare time to focus more on my writing. I just retired, like I said, a year ago, and I've been trying to get back into the workforce so I don't like go broke or anything, because my book sales are not, they're paying for my gas. They're not paying, they're not paying
I
my,
hear that.
yeah,
Yeah.
but
I
yeah,
was
so I'll
curious.
take a break, but I'm back at it. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine. I was just gonna add to what Ryan said.
Mhm.
Would you want it to be live action or animated? Like I could
Oh,
picture it being
live
like a
action.
Scooby-Doo live action. Okay,
Yeah, I'm not much into animated or anime per se. I love me some
sure.
Scooby Doo. Don't get me wrong, I love Scooby Doo. But yeah, I would like it to be live action. The problem with my books is it would probably have to be high budget because you got a lot of Sasquatches, Wendigos.
Yeah.
It would have to be pretty high budget. So I mean, it's not like something I could, go out and do a Kickstarter for 3,000 and go make a movie out of. But
Sure.
now, to answer your question though, Ryan, as far as movies versus series, I kind of lean both ways on those because I've talked to other fellow authors who have attempted to do both, and they say it's easier to make a movie than it is a series,
Mhm.
and I can see that. The only thing about if you read my book, like my first book, when I first started writing it, I didn't think I was going to have enough story to fill a complete book,
Mhm.
which is like 40,000 words or so for it to actually be considered a book.
Mhm.
By the time I was done, it was like over 170,000 words. So it's a pretty long first book,
Yeah.
and there's so many moving parts. I think a series would probably be better suited for my books because it'd be hard to capture the entire story in like two, even 3 hours maybe, but
Mhm.
yeah, within 2 hours, it'd be a hard stretch.
Sure.
Could always go the route of supernatural. Sam and Dean Winchester. Seasons and episodes with the supernatural, and you could always do something like that for
Mhm.
your books.
Yeah.
Maybe
I
go
could
with
drag
some.
Wild Eyed Southern Boys out for seasons,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
that's just my three books. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, my second book is a short prequel, The Rougarou War. It is a shorter prequel. It's like 60,000 words versus 170, and my third book is like or more closer to 130,000.
Mhm.
Um,
Okay.
because the Rougarou War was actually meant to be a backstory for book two. And so I got to thinking, well, I'm going to write the Rougarou War story first, and then I'm going to finish the rest of the story.
Mhm.
And as I kept going on with the Rougarou War, um, if you're not familiar with what Rougarous are werewolves. You're dogmen. You're the Cajun werewolves. Like down in Louisiana, they have a dogman legend known as the Rougarou, which is it's derived from a French word called the gougarou, I think, and they evolved into the Rougarou in Louisiana. So they're the main bad guys for the second and even the third book. it's zombies in the first book, Wendigos. But yeah, so the second book was just going to be a backstory, but as I kept writing it and writing it, it just kept getting longer and longer. And I'm like, I'm just going to have to make this book 2, and then and make it a prequel, and then book 3 actually be the sequel.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I had to separate it like that. But it was good. Because the Rougarou War was a story that had to be told, and it was really in my readers. It was very well received by my readers. They loved it. They's like, I want more Buford and Rue. Buford and Rue aren't in the Rougarou War because we're going back 101 years when Townsend was first Townsend. It gives the backstory of Buford's grandfather, who's in the first book, and Buford and Preacher Cody, who's the Baptist minister of the Sasquatch community of Stillwater in my book. And Preacher Cody is based on my grandfather. He was a Baptist minister, and his name was Robert Cody, the real Preacher Cody. So he's a major character in my book. And so this gives some of his background story in the and it was a story that needed to be told, because I mean, he is a very beloved character from my readers, and that's readers, not me. I mean, he's a beloved character to me, of course, but my readers, love the character as well, because Preacher Cody is an awesome character, one of my favorite characters I've ever written, and so they wanted to know his background. Because Preacher Cody was not always a preacher. He was a knight of the red tunic, which is a warrior Sasquatch. Why did he end up becoming a preacher? That story is hinted in the first book, but it actually gets told in the second book. And it's a very, very powerful story to me and to my readers as well. And then we tell the sequel in the third book that I released last May. And the story continues in book 4, which I'm working on right now. I'm sorry, I know I rambled.
No,
no, you're okay.
We're here to hear about you and your stories. So.
100%.
Yeah.
We got time for about 2 more questions, I'd say, one from me and one from Ryan. So what I would really like to know, and I think would be interesting for the listeners to hear, is why you chose to be an indie author and why you chose to go that route versus traditional published. And if you ever did get offered the opportunity, say an agent came to you and was like, hey, we would like to sign you on to do traditional publish, but you're going to keep your style. We're not going to change anything about your book. You're just going to be trad pub. Would you take that?
Well,
those 2 questions.
Okay, yeah, that's okay. That is it's a very good question, and it's very subjective actually, because I chose to be an indie author because I had a query letter drafted up and everything, and I'm like, okay, I can go, reach out to these publishers and hope and pray that they'll accept me and give me a good offer. And there's pros and cons to both. I'm not, there's pros and cons to traditional publishing. There's pros and cons to indie publishing. I chose to go indie because, it's my first book. And I'm like, I want to get all the royalties. I want to have all the say in what happens with my story, because the story is just, it's so deeply personal. I don't want anybody messing with my story. I mean, of course, I'll listen to my editor, of course, stuff like that, but I don't want just some publisher taking my story and totally changing things up to where it's just not my story anymore. And that can happen with traditional publishers. And that's one of the things I'm like, I want to, it isn't about the money. It's about the story. I want to get my story out there. It wasn't a money-making venture, thank God, because I haven't really, I've made some money, don't get me wrong, but it's not about that. I just want to get my story told. And indie publishing was the quickest, fastest, and most profitable way to do that. If I were to have a big name publisher come up to me, like, Random House or whomever, and offer me a enough money and not and leave me the creative rights to my story, I would definitely consider that.
Yeah.
'Cause I tell you, the bane of being an indie author, here's one that you want to talk about one of the main drawbacks to being an indie author is you do all your marketing, all
It's
the
difficult.
advertising.
I got a secret for you. You do most of it as TradPub too.
You do what?
You do most of your own marketing for TradPub too. Most of those places don't do any marketing for you whatsoever.
And then there's that as well. So
Yeah.
when you go through like indie, you'll get like 70% royalties versus 30%,
Mhm.
and
Sure.
still having to do all your advertising.
Yep.
So if I'm having to do all my marketing and advertising, having to sink money into that, then I want to get all the royalties too.
I hear that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank
Yeah.
you. How about you, Ryan?
I just to touch on that real quick and then we'll move on. I definitely agree. Like the trad publishing is moving towards authors having to do their own marketing, their own building of a fan base, but they do still get a little bit more of that distribution and that backing
Yeah.
of what they've already created for their marketing. But again, like the indie author scene for me is exactly what Richard was talking about with the you have the control over your book and also the time frame. Like you choose when your book comes out. With traditional publishing, it could be 2 years before your book releases from when you send it in. And that to me, it was like, I want my stories out there. So, and for you, the personal touch of keeping it the same, that makes
Yep.
a lot of sense to me. My final question is really like, ever since Nathan brought up this interview and talked about you, the name, the title of your book, like it spoke to me, like it pops. What spawned that title for you, or like how did you come across that? Without, if there's spoilers in the books or something, that don't have to give those away, but
Pure unadulterated brilliance on my part.
mm,
That and the fact that while that 38 Special wrote a song called Wild Eyed Southern Boys that I really enjoyed
okay,
back when I was a kid. Yeah, so yeah, the title I got from a 38 Special song.
hmm
But when I was thinking of this whole story, and this I come up with Wild Eyed Southern Boys, come up with it, when I was when I was a kid.
hmm
When I was like, 8, 10, 12 years old, I thought, Wild Eyed Southern Boys. I mean, I can't remember when Wild Eyed Southern Boys came out. It is one of my favorite songs, but um, yeah, I thought Wild Eyed Southern Boys. You got two buddies down south. One of them is a Sasquatch. Wild
yeah,
Eyed Southern Boys. I mean, it just made perfect sense to me. I'm like, that's a
Yeah.
cool title. Even though it's not my own personal invention, but the song definitely fits. So
yeah.
yeah, that's
No,
all right.
that makes sense. It influenced your work and it fits the story. Like when I was reading the blurb about it and then the title itself, I was like, yeah, that there was no other choice there. That made sense. So it just, that question, I was just curious if there was a story behind it, and then did know that there's like a double entendre with the Sasquatch and then also the song having influenced you. I mean, that's perfect.
100%.
Thank you.
And hey, Richard, if people want to find you, we'll have you give us your social media tag. I'll have you message
Absolutely.
that to me to put underneath. But where
Mhm.
would you like people to come find you to reach out and visit with you, or where to find your books if you'd like to share that with the folks listening?
Absolutely. Okay, so you can find me on Amazon, Richard R. Rose. And when you look up Wild Eyed Southern Boys, there is another Wild Eyed Southern Boys book out there, and it's spelled in plain spelling. It may have dragons or something on it. So I don't write about mythical creatures that don't exist. I write about Sasquatches. Okay, so if you see Sasquatches and zombies on there, that's my book. Okay, that's my Wild Eyed Southern Boys. So it's Wild hyphen eyed, and Boys is spelled with a Z. And Richard R. Rose is the author. So yeah, if you can look at me up on Amazon, Goodreads. I'm also have audiobooks recorded by the great Stephen L. Vernon, who does a fantastic job. This guy is a total pro. He's a theatrically trained actor, owns his own theater, been on TV, and he does a tremendous job with the story and the characters. And the way
Yes.
he does Buford, oh my goodness! If you ever meet a talking Sasquatch, it'll probably sound just like Steve Vernon. I mean, he's that good. So, but you can
100%.
find it on Audible, iTunes, and Amazon and Goodreads. That's where you'll mainly find me.
Absolutely. And if you do, make sure you leave a review and let him know what you think
Absolutely.
on those books. But with that, our time of wonder and enjoyment and experience has come to an end. But thank you so much for coming on our show and taking time out of your schedule to let people hear about your work and your stuff and your life. And hopefully sometime down the line we can have you back on as a guest to talk about some nerdy stuff or what have you.
Hmm.
All right.
Absolutely.
That sounds great. I'm a 52-year-old man child, so I'm all the time, happy to talk about things nerdy.
Awesome. Well, ladies and gentlemen, listeners, thank you for coming back to another episode of the War of Nerds podcast. I've been one of your hosts, Nathan Helm, the Funky Fantasy Man.
And I'm Ryan Morgan, also known as Stratoceros.
Stay nerdy. We'll see you next time.
Take care.